Hey guys, what's up? It's ConjuredJasper, and I am so excited to make another video, and this one is actually themed. It's based on Ouija boards, if you couldn't tell by the title and thumbnail. Please comment, please like, and please subscribe, and let's read some stories. Ouija boards are bullshit, right? Right? And this story comes from user Alma 1989. Hi all, thought I'd share something interesting that happened to me about 15 years ago. Most won't believe me, but for what it's worth, I promise everything I tell you is 100% true. And how it happened to the best of my memory, however names have been changed. I was about 18, and I was hanging out at my friend Joanne's house with some other school friends. Can't quite remember how we got onto the subject, but towards the end of the evening, Joanne thought it would be fun to perform a seance. Joanne and her family were from Cape Town, South Africa, and had a deep-rooted interest in the spiritual, or at least that's what Joanne made it out to be. With the lights off and the candles lit, we all sat at a round table, with cards fanned out around the edge. Each card had a letter of the alphabet arranged A to Z in a shot glass placed in the middle. Joanne starts speaking out to the spirits. I remember pulling a face and rolling my eyes. It was too dark for anyone to take offense. At the time, I was an insufferable, enlightened, atheist teen dork. You know the type. Cringy edgelord who thinks any form of spirituality or religion is beneath me and my superior intellect. I never wore a fedora, but I was damn close. However, what was about to happen made me question everything. It started mundane enough. A few questions were asked, and the shot glass we were resting our fingers on started to move to and from until eventually one of my friends asked the spirit if they were associated with anyone in the room. The shot glass moved directly towards me. Incredulous, I asked the spirit, if you're associated with me, then what's my mother's maiden name? My eyes fixate on the letters that spell out her maiden name, Jones. But the glass started spelling out something different. First, the glass went to T, then H, then O. I thought then it was bullshit, as it was completely wrong. Then I was struck by a horrific realization. My mom was 6 months old. Her biological father died of a heart attack, and a year after that she took her stepfather's name. I completely forgot about this in the moment, as I was expecting the glass to read out the maiden name she had for the majority of her life, but it was actually spelling out her original maiden name of Thompson. It was a fact so trivial that I barely remembered it myself. It was something never talked about even within my family, as it happened so long ago. It would be hard to believe that any of my friends would know this historic piece of my family's history that occurred 20 years before I was even born. But nonetheless, somehow it was being spelled out in front of my very eyes. Thompson. My school friends and I wouldn't talk about anything deeper than video games at the age, yet there's no way I even mentioned this to any of them. It's not like one of my loser friends had a copy of my mom's birth certificate and none of them had ever met anyone else in my family. There was literally no way anyone could have known this. Before I could contemplate this for too long or ask any other questions to my ghostly associate, Joanne's mom came into the room and turned the lights on with a thick Southern American accent, shout something like, "Bloody hell, Joanne, stop messing around with this silly crap," and put a definite stop to the proceedings. Of course, at the time I played it off as a prank, but the more I think of it, the more my mind wonders. Did something actually paranormal happen that night? I know it's nothing dramatic or exciting. I didn't see an apparition or a cryptid, but unlike 90% of the stuff you read on Reddit, this experience is actually true, and something to this day I can't explain. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I just think messing with Ouija boards is like so creepy, and so I like love these stories. And that's why I wanted to make a whole video on the subject, and I might have messaged a few too many people on Reddit, by the way, so next Friday's video also might be on the same subject. If you guys like have any thing that you would want me to make a video on, please comment it, and I probably will, because I love this. Don't ever use the Ouija board. This story comes from user Practical Current 8409. This happened to me when I was in high school. I was at my friend's house at the time, who lived in an apartment building. She had a neighbor who lived upstairs and was a few years younger than us, who we hung out with when I visited my friend's apartment. On the specific day, my friend's neighbor mentioned that she had a Ouija board and asked if we wanted to use it with her. We both agreed, as I personally didn't think Ouija boards were actually paranormal and thought it was a myth. We went into the garage area of the apartment building and put our fingers on the planchette for the first few hours. Nothing really eventful happened. Eventually, we had movements on the planchette and started asking questions to the spirit who would answer us. I forgot who, but someone asked if the spirit was trying to communicate with any of us. Interestingly enough, it spelled out my name. I was skeptical and thought it was one of my friends messing with me, so I asked what its name was. It then spelled out my grandmother's name, who died 6 months before this Ouija board encounter. I started getting a little uncomfortable, as my grandmother's name is in another language and my friends did not know this language. Nor have I ever told them what her name was. They wouldn't even know how to spell it either. Weirded out, I asked what my grandmother wanted. She started spelling out U-R-G-R, and then the planchette started going in weird circles and even going off the board and was not spelling out anything that made sense. So I asked for further clarification and then just spelled out, "You are great. This will be important later, so keep this in mind." Anyway, I just thought it was moving it weirdly and then said goodbye. A few days later, my grandmother's husband, my grandfather, suddenly passed away. It was unexpected, as he was in great health and he was right before Christmas and was so excited for Christmas. As I was at his funeral, I remember sitting there and thinking about the Ouija board, and that's when it hit me. When the Ouija board or my grandmother initially tried to spell out something that started with GR, I realized that grandfather starts with GR. But then the planchette moved around weirdly when my grandmother couldn't spell out the rest of the word, as if something was stopping my grandmother from completing the word and warning me. The next few months was hell, as I started blaming myself and was convinced that I somehow contributed to my grandfather's death. But by using this board, it got to the point that I became suicidal, and the scary part is my thoughts felt as if it wasn't me. It felt as if something was trying to lead me to take my life, but as they were very dark. I can't explain it, as it might have been guilt, but I felt like something was watching me all the time, and I felt a strange presence in the next few months after using the board. There is also the fact of the night of when I used the Ouija board. I was in the bathroom and I was underneath some lights. I had a strange feeling and felt that I needed to walk away. Right when I did, the light shattered and would have injured me if I was standing underneath. I eventually confessed to my mother about the Ouija board experience, and right when I did, I felt a giant weight off of my shoulders. The negative and dark thoughts were slowly disappearing, and I started to not feel the dark presence anymore when I overcame these thoughts. However, I was still wondering if this spirit I contacted to was even my grandmother. I also wondered if I was imagining this dark presence and the dark thoughts I had. Fast forward, I was at an overnight event at my school, and another friend brought a Ouija board. I decided to use it one more time with this friend and find some answers. At one point, the Ouija board said it was trying to contact me specifically. When we asked it who it was, it started spelling out D-E-V. We started panicking, but then it spelled out a word that I forgot. I dismissed it and thought it was nothing, but my friend decided to look up the word. A few weeks later, she told me that it meant devil in another language. It was confirmed to me that it might not have been my grandmother who was contacting me in the first place. There is also the fact that there may have been something that was trying to get to me, and it did not have good intentions. To this day, I am convinced that the spirit only tried to warn me about my grandfather, so that when he passed, I would have felt guilty. By feeling guilty, I would have been more vulnerable to the spirit's influences, to the point that I would almost take my life. I do not know if this is what actually happened, but it's the only logical explanation I have. That is so crazy, and that's so awful. This last one is a two-parter, and it's a no-sleep story, and the user wanted to be kept anonymous. This one's titled, Don't Use Ouija Boards. I remember this experience vividly, even though years have since passed. This month is the 2-year anniversary of the day my friends and I played with the Ouija board. It was a Saturday night late in June 2016. I bought a Ouija board off Amazon and was able to convince a few of my close friends to try it with me. I won't give out their actual names, but let's call them Kyle, Bradley, Rachel, and Steven, so it's easier to follow along. Kyle and Rachel were dating and were non-demotional Christians. They believed in this kind of stuff almost as much as myself. Bradley and Steven were a bit more skeptical, yet were curious enough to join us. I did prior research to our use of the board and found there were some general unspoken rules of the board. First, it's important to not use it in your home, school, place of work, car, or other area where you spend a lot of your time. This is because there are alleged instances of contact being made with the board, and the spirit attaches itself to the area where the board was used. Second, burning candles, incense, and or sage is encouraged to keep malicious spirits away from you while using the board. Pouring salt in a circle around the area you're using the board is said to work as well. Third, never, and I emphasize never, use the board alone. Either one or two scenarios is likely to happen when using a Ouija board alone. Your energy and aura won't be strong enough to contact the dead, so you won't have much success. Or, if you do somehow make contact, you will more likely be dealing with spirits with evil intentions than good ones. 4. If contact is made, never ask questions relating to how you will die. This may invite spirits to attach itself to your death. 5. Don't always trust a spirit or its intentions. Spirits lie all the time. Don't offer too much personal information to the spirit. You may think you're talking to your dead grandparent or Civil War soldier, but you could easily be speaking with an evil entity disguising itself. Or worse, you could be dealing with something demonic, something that's trying to manipulate you into letting your guard down so it can attach itself to you. Finally, always remember to say goodbye after a session with the Ouija board. If not, anyone or anything you communicate with is subject to attach itself to you and following you home. Back to my story. Kyle, Bradley, Rachel, Stephen, and I were equal parts excited and terrified. This was kind of an adrenaline rush for us. We waited until around 1:30 a.m. before we got in Rachel's car and drove up to a pond 5 miles away. Once we arrived, we walked down a path that led to a park next to the water. There was a large roofed area with picnic tables underneath. A public bathroom stood next to it. There were miles of trees surrounding the area and a large pond right ahead of us. We walked over to the picnic tables and rested the board on top. Kyle wanted to say the Lord's Prayer before we started. Once we finished with the prayer, Bradley pulled out his phone to start recording the event. He wasn't going to take part personally, but still wanted some evidence if anything happened. We also needed to use the flash from his camera to see, since there weren't any lights in the area, so we were cool with it. I tried lighting a white candle we bought, but the breeze wouldn't allow a flame to remain lit, so we abandoned the idea. We put the planchette on the board, and Kyle, Rachel, Stephen, and I each placed our 2 front fingers on and started moving it around. "Tonight we come in peace," Kyle said aloud. "If any good-intentioned spirits wish to speak with us now, please come forward and move the planchette on this board." Not much happened at first. We stopped moving the planchette around and instead left it motionless with our fingers still touching it in the middle on the board. I felt a sudden breeze run down the back of my spine. "Are there any spirits here tonight?" Kyle said again. This time the planchette began to move. Y-E-S. This was actually terrifying to all of us. We were trying to figure out if one of us was moving it, but it moved again. S-H-O-W-E-R. Shower? What the hell? We were all confused. Bradley caught our attention and motioned down the path about 20 yards. There were shower heads that people who swam in the pond could use to get the sand off their feet. But there was a dim light right above it, and there was a dark black figure walking around underneath. We didn't notice the light before, and we were all speechless. As quickly as it turned on, the light went out. The planchette moved one more time. R-E-G-R-E-T. I remember Kyle speaking up. "Do you regret your life, the way you died?" N-O. "What do you mean then?" Y-O-U. "We regret?" Y-E-S. "What do you mean? We're going to regret doing this?" Y-E-S. The air got really thick. I could see pure fear on everyone's face. And by the way they were looking at me, I could tell they saw fear in mine. "What are you?" Rachel asked nervously. E-V-I-L. That was it for us. We put the board back in the box. We all stood up, but Kyle told us we needed to say one more prayer before we left. We all joined hands this time, but Bradley's phone in the middle of the circle and recited a prayer. Once we got back in the car, we drove to Rachel's house. I got in my car, said my goodbyes, and got home ASAP. My mom and sister were asleep upstairs. My room was in the basement, so I quietly creeped downstairs. I walked over to my room, but it was locked. I didn't remember locking it before I left, but I pulled out the key, unlocked it, and walked inside. I took off my clothes, put on a t-shirt and shorts, plugged my phone in, and went to use the bathroom across from me. The bathroom was locked, too. This made me frantic. I ran to the guest room down the hall. It was locked, too. I checked the storage room, locked. "Why the hell is everything locked?" I shouted. Just then I heard my phone go off. I ran back to my room. It was Kyle. I answered it. "Dude," Kyle said seriously, "we didn't say goodbye on the Ouija board before leaving. Those are, to this day, the most alarming words I've ever heard in my life. And here's the second part to that story. The night Kyle, Bradley, Steven, Rachel, and I used the Ouija board was one of the more terrifying nights of my life, especially after Kyle called me once I got home to remind me that we didn't say goodbye once we were done with the board. We had every intention on following the rules, including saying goodbye, but we also didn't expect anything to really happen while using the board. Once we encountered the hostile entity, we were so shocked and terrified we weren't thinking straight. Hell, I'm surprised we even thought about saying a prayer afterwards. It was pure fight or flight adrenaline rushing through us. Once I got home and all the basement doors were locked, I realized we may have been in way over our heads by playing with the board in the first place. I was sick to my stomach thinking it had followed me home and was now playing mind games with me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I took a blanket and pillow upstairs and sat on the living room couch with the lights on while watching YouTube videos on my phone. Once the sun came up around 6 a.m., I finally was able to get a few hours of sleep. By the time 9:30 a.m. rolled around, I was so anxious and sick to my stomach I couldn't sleep anymore. I got off the couch and saw my mom cooking breakfast in the kitchen. I told her everything. She was frustrated and disappointed. She called my uncle, who was at the church at the time, and asked him to come over to bless the house at some point that day. He said he would be there later that afternoon. In the early afternoon, I got on the group chat my friends and I were in and asked them if they had any weird experiences themselves. A few of them responded back, not with answers to my questions, but by saying we all needed to meet up and talk in person. Everyone agreed except for Bradley. He didn't respond at all. We agreed to meet at Rachel's house in half an hour. I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and went out the door. I was one of the first to get to Rachel's house. I saw Kyle's car in the driveway behind his girlfriend's. Once I got in, I saw they were both sleep-deprived and had very serious looks on their faces. "We need to talk," Kyle said. "We'll go over everything with you first because Steven's gonna be late. He has to pick up Bradley and bring him, so he won't be here for another 40 minutes. I remember Bradley didn't respond in the group chat, so I figured he wasn't coming. Why didn't he just drive himself, I asked. Kyle responded in a somber tone. He can't. His car isn't working, and neither is his phone. But then I remembered Bradley was recording our entire session with the Ouija board last night. I tried calling Brad multiple times today to invite him over, but his phone wouldn't even ring, Kyle said. I finally called his dad, who gave the phone to Brad and told me his phone was gone. It won't even turn on. Apparently his car is having trouble too. So I asked Steven to pick him up and bring him over. Do you think his phone going dark has anything to do with last night? I asked nervously. Maybe, Kyle responded emotionless. Could be the same for his car. So what do we do? I asked, a little more scared this time. We clearly saw and spoke with something last night. I was getting more frantic in my tone. We didn't even say goodbye to the damn thing, and now it's killing our phones and cars and... Kyle interrupted me. I don't know, Kyle said seriously. I could see the fear and uncertainty in his face. Rachel buried her face in her hands and began crying. Rachel almost died last night, Kyle said very seriously, tears starting to well up in his eyes too. I'd never seen him choke up before, let alone shed tears. I felt sick all over again. What do you mean? She's driving me home after everyone left last night, Kyle said, wiping away tears. Once I got home, I went downstairs and my door was locked. I didn't have the key and my only charger was in here, so I called Rachel to come back and let me borrow her spare for the night, and Rachel interrupted him. I turned the car around, she recalled. I started driving back. I was only 5 minutes away from the house when I heard 3 loud bangs coming from the trunk. It shook my car. It scared the shit out of me. We left the board back there. even though you were supposed to take it with you. You left it with me. You left it in my trunk. She was right. It was my board. I bought it and was supposed to take it with me. I forgot all about it, honestly. And to this day, I've tried reassuring myself it was a mistake. I left it back there. I was terrified, Rachel shouted with tears streaming down her cheeks. After I heard the bangs, I saw something standing in the middle of the road, right in the path of my car. It was the same ugly-looking thing we saw at the pond last night. I was in shock. Once I got close enough, I finally came to and swerved out of the way, nearly going off the road. Rachel buried her face back in her hands and continued to wail. Kyle sat down next to her on the couch to comfort her. After a few moments, Rachel looked back up at us. Her makeup was smeared from the tears. The part that really stuck with me was what it looked like when I got closer and closer on the road. By the time I was only a few feet away and swerved, I could make out a smile. It was smiling at me. Rachel continued. Whatever it was, it wanted me dead. And it was thrilled, the thought of me crashing into a tree or oncoming traffic. Just at the moment I got a call. It was my mom. I answered it. Hey, you need to get home. Your uncle is here to bless the house and wants to talk to you. My mom sounded serious. I told Rachel and Kyle I would be back in an hour to talk to them with Steven and Bradley. I got in my car and drove back home. Once I got there, I saw my uncle's Toyota sedan on the side of the road, but my mom's car was nowhere to be seen. I got inside and saw my uncle sitting in the chair in the living room. He looked concerned. What's going on? I asked. Where did Mom go? My uncle called out my name. What in heaven's name did you do last night? He asked in an equally concerned and ashamed tone. I looked down at my feet in embarrassment. Mom told you, didn't she? Yeah, he responded. But do you realize to what extent you screwed up? What do you mean? I asked nervously. I blessed dozens of houses, he said. I've seen poor intentioned spirits. I've seen ones with evil desires, he went on. But when I walked into this house, I have never felt so much evil in my life. He continued, I sent your mom and your sister up to your grandma and grandpa's house because them being here was too dangerous. I was pale, nauseous, and ready to pass out after hearing that. What have I done? Is it still here? I asked. Yes, he said in a matter-of-fact tone. And until I can get the bishop and his counselors here to help me bless the house and bless you, it isn't leaving anytime soon. Everything got really quiet. I was shaking and he could tell I was scared. Buddy, he said, more sympathetic, do you realize what you and your friends were dealing with when you played with that board? No, I mumbled. He responded back, a demon. I like Ouija board stories, and those were fun. No, please comment, please like, and please subscribe, and if you have any stories that you would like me to read, my subreddit is r/ConjuredJasper, and yeah, ConjuredJasper on any social media you want to find me on. Thank you. Stay spooky, guys.